Hi, welcome back to Watch It Played. My name is Rodney Smith, and this is the final part in our continuing series to learn the two-player game Guild Ball using the Kickoff starter set that was designed and published by Steamforged Games. In the description of this video, you'll find links to the other videos in this series, including the last one, which was about momentum and conditions. But here, we're going to talk about terrain and guild plots. For your first few games, they don't recommend that you use terrain, but when you're ready, there are some terrain tokens included in this starter set that you can use, and you can even create your own 3D pieces, because the game doesn't have to take place on a flat open field. You could be playing in the middle of an old ruins, a town square, or an icy winterscape. The choice is up to you. So let's go to the table and learn how terrain works. Open ground is the default type of terrain for your pitch, and here all of this would be considered open ground, and there's no special rules for it. Rough ground describes things like thick mud, puddles, broken masonry, things that could slow you down or trip you up, like thick plant life or weeds. A model that moves within rough ground at any point during an advance suffers -2 inches from its base and max move values. This penalty is only incurred once during the duration of the advance, so if you went through 2 separate sections of rough ground, you don't lose any extra movement. Also note, this penalty only affects advances, not a reposition like a dodge or a push. Fast ground is an area like an ice patch, slick mud, or wet cobblestone, which we could say this is. A model moving within it during their advance gains 2 inches to their base and max move for the duration of that advance. Like rough ground, this may only be applied once during the advance and does not affect repositions. An obstruction is a small or medium height terrain feature like a statue, a wagon, or a barrel. A model that is within 1 inch of an obstruction benefits from something known as cover. A model like Mallet attacking a target that is benefiting from cover suffers -1 to its tactical ability, or tack, for the duration of that attack. A model may move over an obstruction, or stop or be placed on top of it if there's room for the model's base there. We have flat tokens here, so this is pretty easy, but if you are using 3D models for an obstruction, to go on top of it, make sure the model can actually balance there. Also note that if you have an ability that gives you control of another player's model, you may not move them onto or over an obstruction. If a ball marker would come in contact with an obstruction during a scatter, use the rule of least disturbance discussed in the episode on kicking the ball to put the ball in base contact with the obstruction along its ball path. You will also encounter barriers like the goalposts, or maybe buildings, cliffs, or other impassable terrain features. Like obstructions, a model within 1 inch of a barrier gains cover. But unlike obstructions, a model may not move into or be placed onto a barrier, and these block line of sight. The ball marker may also not be placed onto the barrier, so if the final landing spot for it is within a barrier, or if it would contact the barrier during a scatter, place it in base contact with the barrier along the ball path using the rule of least disturbance. The final type of terrain is forest, which is usually represented by a number of trees on a base. For this example, we'll say this is a forest. It is both rough ground, and a model within it benefits from cover. A model may draw line of sight into or out of a forest. So Friday and Spigot can both see each other. But you cannot draw line of sight through a forest. So now, line of sight is blocked for them. If a model is making a kick from within a forest, or to a target spot or model within a forest, it will suffer -1 die from its pool. However, this penalty may only be incurred once per kick. For example, if Friday was kicking out of this forest to Spigot, who is also in a forest, you would still only lose 1 die related to this penalty. No matter what type of terrain that you choose to use, the most important thing is that both players know what it represents. You saw, for example, that I decided to call this forest. This could just be rocky, rough ground, or a large pile of rocks creating an impassable barrier. The choice is really up to you. Just make sure before the game begins that players both agree on how the terrain will be treated. There's also no strict rules for how much terrain to use, but again, it's always good to plan these things out with your opponent in advance. If you'd like some guidance about a reasonable amount of terrain to use, you'll find a link in the description of this video to the Guild Ball site where you can find the Regional Cup document, which will provide you with lots of helpful advice. Finally, we have the optional guild plots. You don't need these for your first games, and they don't come in the starter set, but if you'd like to use them, you can order them separately or print them for free like I've done here from the Guild Ball website, which again I'll put a link to in the description below. You only need one shared deck between the players, and you'll want them from the season that you're playing in. This starter set is Season 3, and so that's what we have here. As we saw in the first video of this series, during the setup, each player is dealt 5 guild plots secretly, and then they pick 2 to discard secretly. With the ones they have now, during the game, when a requirement written on them is met, you reveal it to claim the reward. This represents the planning and scheming of the various guilds that vie for power and wealth behind the scenes. For example, with Heroic Landing, it says that if a friendly model spends 1 momentum point to use a heroic play, they can then reveal this to gain 1 momentum point for their team, effectively giving them that original heroic play for free. And with that, you now know the rules to terrain, guild plots, and everything else contained within the Season 3 core rulebook for Guild Ball. If you have any questions about anything that you saw in these videos, don't hesitate to put them in the comments below and I'll gladly answer them as soon as I get a chance. But until the next episode, thanks for watching.